Welcome back. Hopefully, you can see this. We should be live now on the Reclaim workshop.reclaimed.tech site. But
I'm gonna go check us out just in
yeah,
case.
I would do
While
that.
confirming.
Yeah. Oop.
It's okay. That's just me.
That's you. Okay. So I don't see it live on the site.
I do
No,
not.
the ID is not. I didn't do something right with the thing. Oh, it's. I think I know what it did.
Is it YouTube Live?
Yeah, that's what I made a mistake. Oh no, that is a live ID. So what the hell?
Mhm.
I'm wondering if because I didn't
So scroll
schedule the
down.
stream.
No, that's session ID. Go down. Copy. Take the session ID.
Yep.
And then cut it, and then put it down in the ID below.
Oh.
Right there.
Oh my gosh.
ID. There you go.
Yep. I just did this wrong.
Okay. So let
All
people know in.
It's okay. We can
I put
kind
it- I
of
put it in the
people.
chat.
Okay.
People will jump in a second here.
Perfect.
But now, if I refresh the page,
We got it.
Maybe.
Do. Okay.
Are we
I'm gonna
hanging?
target to live, and we're good. We're live.
And we are on.
okay, yeah,
Woohoo!
it's on the site now.
The coffee
We
caught
did
up
it.
to us.
We did it, everybody.
All right. So jumping back into the discussion, we ended last session with asking the question to you all, what is domain of one's own? Which sounds like such a simple question, but in fact, it can have many different answers. So I wanted to
And people
start
gave us.
first. Yeah. So I wanted to start first by highlighting some of those. Domain of one's own is a platform where all members of our community can create, manage, and explore different tools to develop their own unique digital presence. What a punch.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Another one, domain of one's own is a space to experiment and learn how the web works, how to think like the web, and explore learning and publishing in a networked digital world. Very cool. I think it's important that we have some of these answers sort of, I don't know, bookmarked or put in our back pocket to be able to pull out when folks ask us. And I know at Reclaim we get these types of questions all the time. How would you talk about domain of one's own to a faculty member with no technical experience? Or, when you're applying for funding for domains, how are you going to define usage and value for something like this? And so I think I'm definitely going to bookmark some of these answers because I think that's really great.
I just brought in another one. This is from Matt. Domain of one's own is a space. Domain of one's own, unfortunately, has the most incomprehensible acronym, right? The little O. I come to love it, but when I first saw the acronym for domain of one's own, I was like, wah, wah, right? weren't thinking about acronyms going out, but DOOO is a space where folks get to tinker and explore digital tools to develop their digital identity and ask critical questions. And I think, I don't know, I know for a lot of the folks here at Reclaim and me when we were first playing with cPanel is that tinkering and playing with cPanel and understanding how like subdomains work and domains work and file structures work on a server was my entree into instructional tech and into a career. And I always thought it was one-to-one between domain of one's own being a space where if someone was interested and turned on by some of this stuff, they could understand, conceptualize, and build out a world, whether it's for hobby, whether it's for professional reasons, whether it's for, completely other reasons. And I still love that idea of the tinkering element of it. Like it's a space where you can still play. Sandboxing was a big term we would use back in the day to talk about domain of one's own and our cPanel accounts as ways to give faculty MediaWiki or WordPress or Drupal who couldn't get access to those tools in any other way in 2006, 2007. And so it was a powerful kind of way to allow faculty and staff to tinker too. So I like that, Matt, a lot. It does resonate with the uses I have found.
Mm-hmm. Just take another look in the chat because I know lots and lots of people. Mo, I like Mo's. Mo from Grinnell. Domain of one's own is a space to experiment and learn how the web works, how to think like the web, and to explore learning and publishing in a networked digital world. Let me see if I can bring that up as a banner.
I love how to think like the web. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
love that. I think a lot about like the first time I realized how the connection between like folders and directories on a server and how that affects a URL. And that
Mhm.
if you know how that works, it may sound very simple, but I think most people who use the web don't know how that works, right? And the fact that you can do things like have a site that's underneath another site, like in a folder sense, and what that does to the URL. And there's a lot of power in that sort of interoperability without a lot of necessarily like technical overhead. Like you don't need to have like a web developer make you a fancy site. That a real common thing we see people do is have like an Omeka site that lives under a subdomain that in the main domain maybe has a WordPress site to showcase the project. And you can do that pretty easily. You don't need to have like a custom theme or something developed for you, right?
Totally.
That stuff is so cool. Even just how URLs are reusable and interchangeable is itself kind of a revelation when you get your head around it.
It was interesting along those lines. Is I was talking with Boone Gerges, who actually is someone who develops the open commons, the CUNY Commons in a Box, which is an open source commons project, which is amazing. Many of you out there already know it. And so we were talking just the other night because he's here in Chicago, or close by in Chicago. And he was saying one of the things that he bemoans a bit is the fact that with the new development of WordPress and so much of the themes and plugins maybe being JavaScript first with some of the block editor, the point for people to tinker and to kind of create becomes a bit higher.
It's a little bit abstract.
It was a little bit more extracted. And it's interesting just to think about this platform and what we were talking about with digital minimalism still provides that space to do a lot with HTML or HTML5. Like there's still a lot of space to explore and build. And, that's one of the things we have to think about when we're providing these tools. Like at what level are we going to get too deep in with trying to teach people JavaScript on the fly or whatever? Like that's a different level of commitment, although people learn PHP enough just to get through. So it's interesting because that platform raises a whole bunch of technical questions too. And, something we have to deal with. So super interesting stuff. I like the low entry bar, by the way, because it's what I'm good at.
Yeah.
Low entry.
This is a little bit of a pivot, but just coming off of what you're saying about the technical ways that domain of one's own affords to its users, it makes me think about the technical, I guess, aspects of the system itself. Just zooming out a level for how the whole thing works.
Well, and even thinking, right, like the fact that, I was mentioning how directories and things and where affect the URL, right? So in the case of domain of one's own, we have three systems that all kind of look like one to the end user, but we know that they are not.
Right.
Secretly under the hood.
And so that's kind of the first step here, right? Is understanding what these three systems are and how they work together to make domain of one's own the way that it is. So in kind of this initial refresh, before we jump, into deeper dives for each of those systems, let's talk about what domain of one's own is made up of from a technical perspective. To start, I am sharing my screen from a domain of one's own admin landing page. This is stateu.org/DOOO-admin. Maybe we can add that as a banner here. This is a landing page. You should see something very similar on your end for your institution. If you don't have a landing page, it's sort of a one-stop shop for login to these systems. We can definitely get that added for you, but I really love that this will sort of define the three systems in the context of domain of one's own. So WordPress is going to be your home page. It is where you're branding this project for your community. It's where your users are authenticating with single sign-on and logging in and signing up for an account. However, you have that workflow set up. We then have WHMCS. which is a little bit of a mouthful, we realize, but WHMCS is your record book. It serves two main purposes. So it's keeping a record of what's going on, but then it's also automatically provisioning cPanel in the background for you. So that's the main role. It's automatically creating cPanel and embedding it in the WordPress wrapper. And we'll come back to that wrapper in a minute. The third and final system of Domain of One's Own is WHM, which is your cPanel server. So it's what's storing the cPanels, it's what's customizing those cPanels, disk usage, cPanel icons, Installatron applications, all that stuff is managed there. And this is also Reclaim Hosting's wheelhouse. So we give you the keys to the kingdom, but we don't expect you to manage this on your own. That's, we're there to make sure that your server is performing well and it's optimized to the best of that ability. And to that point, I'll also mention some of the other resources that we have available, including a status page, which allows you to very quickly check to see if there are any issues with your server. You can always reach out to us. This is at status.reclaimhosting.com. If you ever just want to quickly check to make sure your server is running smoothly. Other server, or I guess options, support resources you have available. Our support documentation is growing almost every day at this point. Our support team is phenomenal and they're constantly writing new documentation. So not only will you have a lot of cPanel and application-based resources there, but we have a whole section dedicated for Domain of One's Own admins in mind. So everything that we're talking about today and tomorrow is likely documented. And if you have a question and you're looking for a more detailed how-to step guide, it will likely be here and we can help point you to the right place. We also have community forums at community.reclaimhosting.com currently. I will say, I think we're kind of working through a little bit of a rebrand with community.reclaim is such great real estate. And I think it needs to,
as
be
names
more.
go.
Yeah, I think that needs to be a landing space for all of the community resources, not just the forums. So that's kind of a goal for the future, I think.
Yeah, because we have brought in new tools like Discord.
Exactly.
We still use Twitter. We have the discourse forums, right? We have the guides.
Event
so there's
calendar,
events, exactly.
So setting this up as a landing page, maybe not with the same layout as the Domain of One's Own landing page, but a similar concept of, hey, what are you looking for? It's all here. Whatever works for you, I think is the concept.
And speaking of community, Taylor Jaden has just recently kind of put together a template for a community showcase site. So we have community support documentation templates, which I haven't linked to yet, but we are now playing with this idea of a showcase site too, which I think is really cool. Taylor, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. So, this site is kind of intended particularly for folks who don't have one already, but someplace where you can showcase the work that your community is doing with Domain of One's Own, your school. And it occurred to me like this is something that most people want with Domain of One's Own, but it's especially hard to, when you're getting started, wrap your head around how you would do one of these things with like a form and collecting submissions and things. So the idea with this is that you can just request a template if you don't have it already, or if you're a new Domain of One's Own school, it'll soon be just part of the setup. And basically you can just install this WordPress template wherever you like it. In this case, we have it at stateu.org/community. And it's already set up with Gravity forms and a very simple form that just says like, hey, tell us about your project. What's the URL? Please include a screenshot. And then you can customize it to make it work for you. In this case, you're seeing this is what you get out of the box. It's just a single test post and a banner, it just says domains community, but you can obviously change the name of that and the color scheme and all that stuff. And the great thing is because it's built on Gravity forms, while it's simple to start with, you can go a bunch of different directions with it. It's not limited to any particular theme or anything like that. So
And I really love that it gives the user permission to share their content, so it's not up to the admin to go around and pick out sites, and then you're kind of having those conversations. You're giving the user the agency to make those decisions on their own.
One of the things that I could see admins doing with it is maybe soliciting like submissions to that once in a while. And if you've got like a class that or maybe you help faculty member with classes doing blogging, maybe you check in with that at the end of the year and go, does anyone want to submit things here? Or you could even email using, and we'll show this later, but using like the bulk email tools and WHMCS. There's a lot of directions I think a lot of things you could do to make this a useful part of your domain of one's own.
And we'll hear more about Gravity Forms from Tom Warburton himself tomorrow. So that will be part of Domains 201. I do think with what I refer to as the holy trinity of the domain of one's own setup is, as Lauren pointed out, there's WordPress as the wrapper. There's WHMCS as kind of the middleware and account everything that's happened across the entire basically infrastructure by reporting what new accounts were added to WHM. And WHM is effectively your cPanel server, right? That's what you pay for. We use WHMCS to automate the creation of accounts, and WordPress sits on top of it and doing what a good open source tool will do. It allows us to leverage an open source community to get stuff like Shibboleth plugins, to allow us to kind of refactor WordPress. So you never know you're in WordPress unless you're an admin. Students and faculty and staff who are using it just log in there with their single sign-on, and what is happening is a cPanel account is embedded in a WordPress page, and that's the trick, right? Major kudos to Tim Owens and Martha Burtis for spending a lot of time at UMW kind of playing with this idea and fleshing it out. But, it also points to the birth of Domain of One's Own as a kind of, couple of ed techs imagining what's possible within cPanel to bring it to a broader community. So I think what I love about Domain of One's Own, and I probably always will, is it's born of the work we're doing right now, right? It's kind of like, here's what's possible. Here's how we can build it. Here's a series of tools that we're really bringing together, knitting together small pieces loosely joined and some not so small. I guess a server isn't a small piece, but you get the idea that we're tying together these tools. We're making them look like it's one big seamless system, but in fact, there's a lot of room to play. And then there's also some caution with that we'll talk about in the coming sessions. But I love it. I love the idea that, it is a system born of the ed techs who built it. Yeah. Yeah.
Any final comments in Discord or any final questions before we jump into a deeper dive into WordPress and I suppose cPanel?
I'll have to give them at least 30 seconds to hear that.
Yeah, no, they're on a little bit of a delay.
But that's okay. We're capable of waiting sometimes.
There are a bunch of links to all of the resources that Lauren and Taylor just talked about in the chat, by the way. A little bit of a link spam, but if you are curious and you want to take a look during the break or later today, that should all be available for you.
Great.
And I think with that, we'll catch questions in Discord as they come in, but I think we're kind of up on time. So this is probably a good chance to end and switch gears for the next session.
That's right, which will happen at the top of the hour. So
We'll see you there.
a 5-minute break and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.